best represent the local housing industry. You will each be given 1.5 minutes as well. You can watch Mari for the timers. And the order we'll be going in is start with the same order I called you up. Chuck Good and Brad Last, followed by Daniel Holloway and Lowry Snow, and concluding with Walt Brooks and Keith Kelch.
Thank you. Is it working?
Yes.
Now, that works really well, thank you. My name is Chuck Good. I'm running for the House of Representatives in District 71, Hurricane, the whole eastern half of Washington County. My goal in running is to be a voice for those who don't really have their voice heard very often. I was talking to Brad earlier. We're not really running against each other. I want to be an addition with information because I've lived in Tokerville for 25 years and I see this layer of society, mostly because of my social interactions. In the Episcopal Church, we started the soup kitchen 10 or 12 years ago because the Catholic Church had 1 meal per week for those homeless people. Now we serve 5 days a week for those homeless people. It's such an impact that we are now included in the Switchpoint homeless program. I have a love for those people, for Utah being in such a social crisis, not only with homelessness, but with suicides and with healthcare issues and bankruptcies and addictions and opioids. So I hope to represent that loving part of the legislature that cares about what happens to the people as well as business and economy. Thank you.
Thank you. As you can see, I have a worthy opponent. Chuck is really a good person. I've really only met him and talked to him when we have these kind of events every couple of years. So it's nice to get together, Chuck. Anyway, I'm from Hurricane. Many of you know me. I grew up here, attended Dixie College and then University of Utah, and came back as quick as I could get my wife, who was from Salt Lake, to come back here. And I love the area, and I, as strange as it may sound to some people, I think Southern Utah is a better place to live now than it was when I grew up. I loved Hurricane. I loved riding my horse past the Deseret News and all of that stuff. I never could figure out why the people from California always wanted to take my picture. It just seemed so normal to me. But one of the things I always appreciated with the old timers, I think of Winford Spendlup, for example. He was an old farmer, but he was really involved in water development. And the old timers were so open to having new people come in. And if you'll notice now, it's still the old timers who are happy to have people come in. We welcome people. It's the people that have come here recently that don't want to have other people come in. I believe the same things that those of you sitting in this room believe. I believe in private property rights, and I believe that the growth is okay as long as we handle it appropriately. And I want my kids to have a place to live. So I think the way I can help you is to just, share my values with the people in Salt Lake, because I believe the same thing you do.
Okay.
Hi, I am Daniel Holloway. Just wanted to kind of address the elephant in the room. I am older than I look. I do have a lot of gray hair. I attribute that to my mom. She looks very young. The reason why I wanted to run, for so long in District 74, we haven't had a choice in representative. We've had one person who's been doing a good job, who's been doing his best job, I would think, to try to represent us. But when we go to our ballot box, we only had one name to choose from. The free market and capitalism only works best when there's competition, and that is the same in elections. We need competition. For the last 6 years, we've had a legislature who's voted to increase our taxes every year, to increase spending every year, and not to make hard choices on cut wasteful spending. I wanted to provide a quality option to the voters of District 74 of someone who would not vote for tax increases, but would look to actually cut the wasteful spending so we can reduce those taxes and return it to you, the people. That's where it's best suited. Every time government takes from us, it cripples the economy. We need to give back to the people to loosen up the economy, to let it actually grow and soar. And that's why I wanted to run.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank SUHBA and also the Washington County Real Estate Board for allowing us to be here. Why did I get involved in politics? In 2012, David Clark, who was serving as state representative, decided to give up that seat and run for Congress. When I knew that was going to happen, I said to myself, it's important that Washington County have a strong voice, someone that looks out for the interests of the folks that are sitting here and who live in this county. I represent western Washington County. That includes St. George, parts of St. George, Ivins, Santa Clara, Bloomington Hills. And it's been a real pleasure to represent these folks and this county in the last 6 years. The reason I felt like we needed a strong voice of representation is because I've been heavily involved and continue to be involved in economic development. I still sit on the council, and during the last very serious recession that many of you remember, I had the honor of serving as the chairman of that body. But one thing I found out was that unless Washington County folks spoke up for themselves, no one else up north would. And I said to myself, it's important that we have that strong representation. My background is in law. I'm an attorney. They call me the senior partner. That's a nice way of saying I'm the oldest in the firm. But I'm have those skills that I think that I can take and continue to move forward the agenda for this county and for our state. I actually have not run unopposed. I've been opposed in every election except for the last one. I've had some very good candidates, and I have a good one now too. I look forward to continuing to be a strong voice representing you. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing us to be here today. I'm Walt Brooks. I grew up here in St. George. I live in a house that was built in 1880, and therefore I have to be a professional plumber, electrician, roofer to try to keep that thing still standing. I'm not a politician. I kind of came about the same way Representative Snow did when Senator Ibsen joined the Senate. That spot was open, and I never really liked politics all that much either. It just made me mad. So I'd follow it along, but I never wanted to be really that close to it. But I had several people come suggest that I run, and I had a great man that was a great mentor of mine. He was my priesthood advisor and scoutmaster when I was a little kid, and I told him that I didn't want to run because I had a couple dozen people ask me to, and he said, well, why not? And I said, well, I have to be careful with this company. He says, politics is like the sewer, and when you work in the sewer, you come out smelling like the sewer. And I didn't really want that.
Thanks, Walt.
Sorry. So you have to be careful with that. You smell great. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, well, that's why we need good plumbers. And so it hit me like a ton of bricks. You know, I'm 45. I have a very mature haircut. But I have my background in business, and I felt this is a time that I can do it. I have a small software company here in town, and I have the ability that I could go. And so I felt like it was my turn to stand up and do what I felt was the right thing. And I'm out of time, but we'll talk about more other things later.
You can tell that a politician is a politician when they don't answer the questions. I'm going to answer the question really briefly. Why am I running? Because I was asked by several people in the community. A lot of depth, 25 years in education. I'm a builder, I'm a general contractor. Now I can explain why we are not making housing affordable. To be honest with you, you can't. You can't build affordable housing. I know, I've tried to do it. I worked for a nonprofit housing organization for 5 years, built 63 homes, all under budget. The problem is once you get those families into that home, I have some equity, about a few years later they sell that, the house is now a market rate home. So how can you keep housing affordable? The key is to get families into homes, and the best way to do that is down payment assistance. Stop trying to make housing affordable on the physical level. What can we do? I have a vision for that. And I would like to share that with SUHBA, with our realtors, and all that in the community. All it takes is about $600,000 per city And we can start a program that's going to allow for down payment assistance for families. That's the trick. If you can help with a little bit of cash, this down payment assistance, you're going to get families into homes. That's what we've got to do. We've got to have real solutions from real experience. And I have a lot of experience in housing, a lot of experience in a realtor. My wife's a realtor. I married the greatest realtor here in the room, right over there. Stand up, Melissa. And if I didn't do right by that, then you shouldn't vote for me. I'm the genuine optimist. Keith counts with real experience, a lot of depth. One of the things you need is someone who can write. A master's in technical writing. Go up there and send me up to the legislature. I can help craft law that's going to give you power. Keith Kelch, the genuine optimist.
Thank you all for answering that question. The second question, again, has to do with the Lake Powell pipeline. First, we want a yes or a no as to whether you're in support of the Lake Powell pipeline. And with that, if you feel the Lake Powell pipeline is vital to continued long-term growth and economic stability in our community, if yes, please explain how the Lake Powell pipeline should be paid for. If you oppose the Lake Powell pipeline, please explain why. You'll each be given, again, 1.5 minutes. So for this question, we'll start with State House District 75 candidates, Keith Kelch, and then Walt Brooks, followed by candidates for House District 74, Lowry Snow and Daniel Holloway, and we'll conclude with State House District 71, Brad Last and Chuck Good.
Yeah, I'm in favor of grabbing the water. If it's ours, let's go grab it. It's how we do that, that's the question. We've been told we have several $100 million in the bank. Well, what bank do we have that in? It's probably Zions or Chase Manhattan or something like that. One of the best ways to finance that is to create our own state bank, like the North Dakota State Bank. Just do some research on that. The Bank of North Dakota actually finances all of their major infrastructure projects because they put all the revenue from the state in their own bank. And with fractional reserve banking, they're able to finance some of their major infrastructure. So you don't have to go after a bond. I'm not a fan of bonds because that's just giving somebody else opportunity to make money off of us, just like lending. And somebody else is making the interest off of us. We don't need to do that. It's innovation, it's vision. People with a lot of research in finance, people with a lot of research and all of the ideas that are happening out there, but we tend to not bring those to the table. So there's a way to do that. If the water's ours, let's do it. Let's conserve water as well. Do everything we possibly can. Hope that answered that question for you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, I am in favor of the pipeline. 2 years ago when I ran, I had a lot of hesitation. I wasn't quite sure about it because I thought there might be other resources in the Snake Valley area that we could bring water down. And as I did more research, because good data brings good decisions, I went to our neighboring states and looked, and this is the only option we have left to get water into Washington County. I grew up here when there was less than 7,000 people in St. George, and we're a little over that now. And it does take water for us to grow. And so the way we pay this back, and I think Evan Vickers articulated it really well, is the state's got to be the big brother to make sure that we can handle this, because we in this room cannot do this. And we can't just put huge burdens onto impact fees. We'll talk about later about a bill we helped with impact fees for the realtors and the builders. But we have to be able to pay a certain that we can afford. When we're building this pipeline for future growth. So as that future growth grows, then they'll say you can pay that same rate at a higher volume. So we pay like this, just like our growth was. And we have enough good data showing the growth that we've had in the past 30 years, that we're showing what we project in the next 30 years, that can spell out well for how we're going to pay this back and keep it where we can afford it. Thank you.
Last July 29th, marked 39 years that I've been a resident of Washington County. Moved here that long ago with my family. Now, I don't tell you that because that necessarily means anything and gives me any advantage over anyone else, but it does give me an advantage of perspective of the history of Washington County in terms of the most incredible growth that has undertaken during that period of time. The projections are that we're still going to continue that growth. In fact, this particular area, this metro size, has been listed as the _1 growing area in our country. So it is a population and growth issue that needs to be dealt with. And we can't account for that without providing for adequate water. So yes, I'm in favor of the Lake Powell pipeline, and I have been for a number of years. The reason is it's not just about providing water for our homes and our businesses, but it also directly relates to economic development in this county and economic growth. The reason that I know that is during my time working with economic development, when we would recruit and have good companies coming to this area or coming to Utah, they would have a checklist, and one of the things they would look at was the availability of resources. One of the things that needs to be evaluated is how much is it going to cost, how do we pay for it, but the other analysis needs to be what happens if we don't do this. Number one, we lose the water. Number two, what happens to property values? Number three, what happens to the growth? I happen to have an abundance mentality. I believe by proper planning, conservation, and making arrangements for that growth, this can be accomplished and our community can continue to thrive and grow. Thank you.
So this is where, when I said I wanted to run, I wanted to provide options to the voters. This is one of those options. I am against the Lake Powell pipeline. That is a no vote for me. And it's very clear and very easy decision. Estimated cost of the Lake Powell pipeline starts at $3 billion. If you take 50 years or 90 years to pay that back, is what they're looking at, we're looking at $12 billion just to pay it. They've talked a lot about we have to get our portion of the water. The portions and allocations of the water was done in 1922 on a very high flow year. It's never been that high since. They say we gotta get our water. That water doesn't exist. I work in an industry where we go after, and we help businesses with their account receivables. And I hear this all the time. You can't squeeze blood out of the turnip. If the water's not there, we can't have it. It doesn't matter how much money we dump into this project to try to bring it here. If it doesn't exist, we're not gonna have it. There are better solutions. I would like to see the portion of our property taxes that we're currently paying that goes to water to be cut. And then we can take that money that we're saving to be able to reinvest or raise taxes on the water usage so that people are actually using more water, are paying more water. That'll incentivize for conservation. People will actually start using less water here in Utah or in southern Utah. After that, there are other projects like the Ash Creek Reservoir that's being built right now. And I think that could better address our needs in this county.
Thanks for that question. The water crisis that we're facing is something that has a lot of stakeholders. And the stakeholders aren't against each other. It's not a water war in the West. It is a group of people that are united in trying to come to a solution that's balanced. We have to consider each one of those stakeholders and make sure that we find a solution that can be sustained. If the problem was one of distribution, where you need to run water from over here to over here, I think the pipeline would solve it. That's not the problem. The problem is just availability. There's not enough water for the projected growth. Now, I agree with Bob Ford that we need a lot more data before we can make decisions like this. But there are so many options to conserve water that we haven't tried yet. And the technology for that already exists. It's already been proven in Tucson, Albuquerque, those places. And as the price goes up, believe me, the usage of water will go down. There's a natural thing happening in Washington County where the agricultural land is decreasing and the urban is increasing. And you got a lot of water when agricultural land stops using it.
To answer the question, do I support the pipeline? Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's a little bit hard to grasp for all of us, and certainly one of the responsibilities that we have as people in the public arena, and that is that we're planning for 50 and 100 years down the road. And I think it's really hard for us to imagine what that's going to be like. And all of the things that everyone else has said are true. Do we need to conserve? Absolutely. Do we need to consider building different types of homes, different types of lots, all of those things? Do we need to have increasing property or increasing water rates for increasing use? Do we need to have meters on every water hookup? All of those things, absolutely. Do we need to increase impact fees? You guys don't want to hear that, but we probably do. Do we need to increase water rates? Yes. Everybody is going to have to participate. But we need to get that water here because we're looking 50 or 100 years down the road. And this community will literally dry up and blow away if we don't have that water. And when we say, well, we don't really have the water in the Colorado River, and I just say to myself, okay, well, let's depend on the Virgin River. I mean, if the Colorado River's gone, what do you think is going to happen to the Virgin River? We're going to be hauling water from who knows where. And that is something that I actually believe that someday in this country, we will have a system of water distribution similar to power distribution that we have now. Think about that.
Suggest that for the last 20 years.
Thank you all for your responses. So for the last question, I'll go ahead and read it. It is, housing affordability is becoming an increasing issue as the labor shortage continues. Limited land availability, rising material costs, and regulation, like impact fees, are all affecting housing affordability. Please share with us what can be done to address the housing affordability issue and any closing remarks that you may have. We'll allow 2 minutes to each one of you. We'll start with House District 74, Daniel Holloway and Lowry Snow, followed by Chuck Good and Brad Last, and we'll conclude with Walt Brooks and Keith Kelch.
Thank you. I want to thank you guys for inviting me out here and for SUHBA and the Realtors Board holding this forum. I think it's really important to get out and to hear all the points of views. On the first question of how can we make housing more affordable, the main issue or the main driving force that will help make it more affordable is going to be the free market. We need to do more to be able to diversify the market to allow for different varieties of housings. Out in Moab, in Kane County, the city council out there decided they wanted to try something that I would hate to see them try to do out here in Washington County. They wanted to mandate builders to build housing for every new business that they build. So whenever they build a hotel, they'd also mandate that the employer also builds affordable housing, subsidized, and have a place for the employers. This stifles growth. It stifles growth because, one, employers who don't provide housing for employees now cannot get employees, and they have to pay more money. And they're eventually going to have to either build housing for their employees, or they're going to have to pay more. But whenever the government gets involved, that actually stifles the growth and the income of the employees. And so for them getting involved is actually harming the economic growth. And I would not want to see that here in Washington County either. The free market would be able to address these issues by allowing employees to compete for employers to compete for employees, by if they want to provide these housing for their employees as income, supplemental income, they'll have more options on employees. And that will force other employers to do the same thing. Or other employers would have to pay more, increase income. This would grow our economy a lot faster than any type of government intervention ever would, which would make housing in consequence also more affordable because there would be a lot more competition and a lot more variety. Yeah, my name is Daniel Holloway, and I appreciate your time, and please vote for me.
The last 6.5 years that I've represented the folks in my district and the state has been a great honor. And there's never been a time that I arrived at the Capitol or that I undertook legislative duties that I wasn't impressed by what an honor it was to represent the people and the trust that's involved. So I appreciate that, and I hope that you will send me back, because it's important that the issues for Washington County and Southern Utah continue to be addressed in a strong way. There's two things that I think that the state can do to help with that issue, the affordability issue. One is we have to do a good job at making certain that we don't impose regulations at the state level that affect housing prices unreasonably. We have to be careful and make sure that's not happening. We also have to be a watchdog over local government to make sure that they're not exceeding what they should be doing with respect to imposing impact fees. So we have laws in place that say if you're going to charge an impact fee on a local government, it has to be tied to a capital facilities plan. There has to be a nexus. We have to continue to be a watchdog over that. The next thing that needs to be done, I think, on a local level is we need to educate and change attitudes about issues like density. I really like what Gil Almquist said about design trumps density. And I'd even add to that and say design and technology trump density. And we have to get a little bit out of the box, sorry to use that phrase, and think about doing things differently in terms of making housing available to our friends and neighbors. I was at an affordable housing meeting last week, and the individual there that we were discussing said, did you know there's a waiting list for people to get in apartments, and the size of the apartment is 475 square feet. That's just about the size of a hotel room, and there's a waiting list. It's an issue that will take cooperation between the state and the local government to help do this. And if I'm sent back, I'm committed to help resolve that issue, or at least work towards a resolution of that issue. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Chuck Good, and the word affordability can only be solved in one of two ways. You make it cheaper and build it smaller, or you increase the amount of money people have to pay for it. I agree very much with Lowry that technology and policy are going to be the solution to this. But you have experienced, just like me, the housing prices increasing dramatically. Every piece of the house building increasing dramatically, and wages not increasing. So who can afford to buy those houses? The people putting the roof tile on can't live there. You know, the people making the beds can't stay in that hotel. The wages are the problem. They're ridiculously low. I started out as a sharecropper's son, living wherever we could live. And my solution was education. Education is the escape hatch from poverty. And we have 12% of that in Utah, even more in Washington County. If we don't fund education and make kids first, number one, we're never going to increase those wages. But that's a way for them to succeed. Your video shows people making $65,000 as electricians. That's what we need. The technological solution to affordable housing is we need a whole new way of building houses. You've seen the iPhone and the internet change society in the last 10 years. That's not even close to what you're going to see in changes to home building in the next 10 years. Technology can really solve that problem. That house is going to be a computer. It's going to have very great control of the water and the energy. And I'd like to help with that. My name is Chuck Good. I'm running for representative in HD 71. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. And thanks again for all of you for having us here, and to my colleagues and the other candidates. As far as this whole issue of affordable housing, I realize it is a challenge. I agree to a large extent with what Lowry said, that this is not necessarily much of a state issue. It's largely a local issue. I think back to a few years ago in Hurricane, when we were having kind of a zoning argument or discussions maybe. There were people who really wanted the South Fields in Hurricane to have a lot of open space, and they said the way to have a lot of open space is to have half-acre lots. And as you know, that doesn't work very well, because what you end up with half-acre lots is either a lot of mess, a lot of big lawns, and a lot of water usage, and not very much open space. And so a lot of what has been said is about zoning. I think that's really something that needs to be taken into consideration. And I do think that this new generation of young people coming up look at things very differently than the rest of us do, in terms of having a great big house and accumulating a lot of stuff. And you hear a lot about that now, so I think we're going to see some of that happening as well. One small thing that we do have some influence over at the state level, and that's the Utah Housing Corporation. There are several properties locally that have been built with the help of the Utah Housing Corporation. And I have 2 children who have benefited from that by living in some apartments while they were in college, and their income was low enough that they qualified for fairly low rent in these facilities. St. George and Washington County generally has not been able to get those projects lately with the tax credits because there's been so much emphasis in building in the Salt Lake area with transit-oriented development, something we don't really have to think about yet or aren't thinking about yet, but we will at some point. I appreciate the opportunity to have served in the legislature for the past 16 years. I feel like I have done my best to represent Southern Utah and would love the opportunity to do it again. So please vote for me. Thanks.
I think it's pretty well been said that in order to solve problems like this, it takes collaboration from all aspects, from the state all the way down to the county, to the city. And I'm a big believer that the closer the controller, the government to the people is, usually the better decision you get. So the local control, like Brad talked about, is going to give probably the best decisions. But there's things we can do because we need to work together on this. For example, I worked really closely with Representative Schultz. He's a builder up in Hooper. And we worked on the impact fees. We passed a bill that when the city collects impact fees and they're not being used or encumbered, they got to be returned back to the owner that paid them. So there's all these little regulations we can do to make sure that there's not too many regulations that kind of free up what builders and what people who are buying property can do. The other thing that surprised me, and I was actually glad to see, I sit as vice chair of the Infrastructure and General Government Committee, which is over roads and state buildings and stuff. And one thing that, even though we had a gangbuster year last year and the previous year, we are still looking at the budget on every single line item trying to reduce costs. And one of the things that we found was there was not an inventory of property that the roads use. They'll buy a big swath, put a road in, and then go to the next project. And there's 2.5 acres here, 6 acres here, 4 acres here, that are just sitting empty. And so we mandated that they come back and have all those pieces of property inventoried, and if there are surplus properties, they're not going to build on them, to turn it back over to the counties. We're going to sell it to private, so now builders have more land to use. It gets it back onto the tax rolls for the county to help pay for the things that need to happen in the county. And those are things that we can do, and there's lots of little things, and they take a lot of work. And that bill that I just talked about, we're running it this year. It's gone through every single committee. It's received 100% approval on all the committees, and it will be heard on the House floor this year. All these little teams and pieces, things that we can do at the state level is going to free up what the counties and the cities can do to help solve these problems. I'm Walt Brooks, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
I get very excited about this. I'm a very passionate guy. You have to forgive me on that. Again, I have a lot of experience in this, having built affordable housing for many years, been a builder for 15, 20 years. And I've tried every technology you can shake a stick at, trust me, on trying to make a housing affordable. And it's very hard. Even if you have the best design, it's really, really hard. What I'm most concerned with is a lot of the rental housing in town that's gone dilapidated, and we're seeing that increase exponentially. It's called the residual income, and a lot of people are using rental housing as a way to retire. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem is why are we not competing in the same market privately? Why are we not using that as an energy driver to lift housing to its highest and best level, use the rental from that to offer an affordable housing for people, down payment assistance or something like that. I think that the wealth in this community is phenomenal, but we just never realize it as a resource, as a competitive resource to offer something as a community. A rising tide lifts all ships, and if we think the state is the tide, that's not going to lift us. Every time we give away responsibility to some agency or some federal program or what have you, we take no responsibility from that. And as a result, apathy grows. And when you have apathy, vision suffers. We have no vision in our community. That's our problem. We need to open that up to a vision that would be within our own grasp, within our own management, that's a wealth generating process for us. There's ways to do this without affecting market rate housing, lifting the value of houses across the community. I don't want to see any single community become dilapidated anywhere in Washington County. There's no call for that. If there's a single home that's gone completely in disrepair because of a landlord that just doesn't care, let's go after that and buy that, bring it up to its highest and best, and use that as a rental property for the families getting into that. There's all kinds of neat things you can do with that. 10% of that can go right into a fund that can help them get into down payment assistance. So now they're treating the property well, you're educating them well. There's so many wonderful things we can do here in our own community. Thanks. Vote for Keith Kelch, House District 75.
So this concludes our candidate forum here today. Wanted to express our gratitude to each of the